Good morning. Hope everybody's good this morning.
You'll look in Titus chapter 2, verse 7. And I sent a little picture for the week. My wife's going to show Brother Dan, so he can see it. But if you'd like to pull it up and look at it, refresh your brain. If you've looked at it, if you don't mind to look at it. This is something Sister Debbie shared something not too long ago to me, and this was a photo that was with it. Because I use visuals, sometimes people will send me pictures just in case I could use them as inspiration. So I appreciate that. Always feel free to do that if you ever come across anything. Can't promise I'll use everything, but you never know, do you? And I thought this one was really nice. And you look at it, and that verse in Titus 2 and 7, when I was reflecting on the photo, thinking about what it could represent, Titus 2 and 7 came to my mind for a very specific reason. When I look at that photo, and there's other stuff that goes with it, which I did not include. My main purpose is for you to have the visual. But what goes in helps articulate and direct what comes out, doesn't it? If you look at that image of that little individual, what's going in, what's being heard, obviously is reflected by what comes out. Now, we all become our own person, so we know that this holds true to some degree. Maybe to a large degree when kids are little, but to some degree. And then later on, we all develop our own opinions, our own ways of viewing things, our own ways of making choices and so forth. So what comes out is not always a direct representation of what we've heard, but becomes a representation of how we feel, how we process, and what we think. But just to use this picture as it is, in Titus 2 and 7, in all things showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, and sincerity. And while I was reflecting on this photo and what it could represent, what it can mean, especially on the surface of what goes into a child, is what will come out when they speak. Most of us can figure that out from the photo, that the words that the adults are saying will impact what comes out of them. If you encourage and praise child's accomplishments, then the child can also speak encouragement and praise to others, won't they? Often what is modeled is what they portray when they make their own choices and decisions, and when they make, especially when you watch them in groups. Now, they have their own personality. Every kid is different. But you'll hear sometimes, especially, I guess, grandparents, when they watch their grandchildren, they make comments, yep, that's just like your daddy. Little things, because they emulate the behavior of what they've seen, or they have that genetic trait. But if you encourage a child or you praise them, then that can be also what they speak. If a child often hears ridicule, being belittled, then unfortunately those are the words that frame their vocabulary. Those are the words that frame their thoughts and how they process life situations that are presented to them. And if the way you deal with life is you belittle and you criticize, then those unfortunately are the words that come out of that child's mouth when they encounter life and when they encounter people or friends, when they encounter their friendships and situations they face. But there was a thought that hit me that's certainly, somebody can take that photo and you obviously focus on the word aspect. But I wanted to take it further. There is something other than our words that impact. In this case, you could use the little literal photo, how a child acts in response to life and the situations that surround the child. There's things other than words, and what are they? They are actions. The actions they observe. It's not just the words they hear. Those have a huge part, but it's also the actions, because children could hear the words they're supposed to hear, and eventually they become old enough to say, well, they keep saying this, but why don't they act that way? Kids are pretty intuitive. They start to notice those things. They may say, well, Uncle Danny says this, but why does he act this way when a life situation happens? Why is he telling me to act like this? Why is he saying those words? But then he acts very differently when these things happen. And that thought really struck me. And there's a reason. Well, I'll share a little bit later. And I debated whether or not to even share this, but I will, Lord willing. But other than words, actions leave an imprint on a child's mind and their heart. Actions, now we're going to move away from just children. Actions leave an imprint on other people too. And I thought about that the canvas analogy that I used. I think it was last week. What's being painted on our life canvas is what other people will see, the image that is presented to them. We're all presenting an image to the world, and that's what's painted on our life canvas, excuse me. What makes those images? Well, she's so thoughtful. Thank you. So what is being put on our life canvas? Images that are directed, thank you, sir, from our choices, from our experiences, and certainly from our words, right? Those present an image to other people, those present an image about what we say we believe. But it's more than just words. It's also action behind those words. And that's what I really thought about when I looked at that little photo and I thought about the seriousness of, there are people who, I always tell kids when we have discussions, they're so cute. They know what to say because some of them have been taught that. But honey, that ain't always what they do because they're 12. They're children. So I try to get them to reflect. I know, and I just kind of address it up front. I'll say, now look, when we talk about this topic, you're going to be sweet. All those wonderful things to say, but I want you to think on this. Do you do it? And they kind of get them, and they'll just sit there. And they kind of look at me because they're just kids. They just need to think about it. Well, sometimes as adults, we know all the right words. We know all the things we're supposed to say. And those are building an image on our life canvas. But what are my actions saying? What are my experiences, my choices, my decisions, my reactions? Am I proactive? Am I reactive? There's all these things that come into play to make me reflect on that question again. What am I presenting to others? Are my actions and my words? Think about that image. They flowed from the parent into, I'm assuming they were parents. We don't really know. Let's just say they flowed from the adults into the kid, right? Because that's what he was absorbing in the environment that he was in. So if I think about that, are my actions and my words flowing into others as encouragement and hope? And do they flow back out of those people and positively impact the life image they're creating for themselves? Because ultimately, the goal, especially people who deal with kids, is you want to have a positive impact. You just want, as best as you can. You address issues and you deal with all those things. But the goal of even doing that is you want to have a positive impact as best as you can. Because what's put into them will flow back out. And I thought about that as I encounter people in the world, and my wife and I, we talk about this. And I tell her, you just desperately want people to realize the love that Christ will offer them. Things that need to happen and things that need to occur, those things can fall in place in His time with His help and His direction. But for them to first taste the love and freedom that He gives, that peace that He can give you in a hard situation, and you understand that He does it because He just loves you, and He really wants to help your life. He wants you to live a better life. If people could just taste and hold on to that, my goodness, how much better life is. And you just desperately want them to feel it. Or for me, I just desperately want them to feel it. So what flows out of me? What life image am I presenting on my canvas? Because that's going into somebody and making an imprint, isn't it? I'll put it on me first. I don't mind to use me as the example. I need to reflect on it, obviously. I'm not accountable for all the choices, of course, people make around me. You can't take that burden. That's ridiculous. At work, other people make their own choices, no matter how positive you're trying to be. But I can ask myself this question. What influence am I having? In 1 Timothy 4 and 12, if you'd like to look there, 1 Timothy 4 and 12. Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers. And I highlighted that part and put it in bold. Be thou an example. That should be a goal. What flows from my life. And I wanted to take this much further than just words. A lot of people, as I tell my kids in class, when you talk about serious stuff sometimes, I can address that fact. They already know what they're supposed to say. So do a lot of adults. We know what we're supposed to say, we're supposed to do, and we're supposed to believe, and we're supposed to represent. But what does my life show? What's on my canvas? What is someone really gleaning from me? What's flowing from me into those other people that I'm around? But be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. And in 1 Peter 5 and 3, 1 Peter 5:3. Neither as being lords over God's heritage, and these last 5 words, but being ensamples to the flock. So we have a duty with each other to be an example, of course, but to think about the potential flock, the potential people who could come in, and the potential that you have to want others to feel the love of Christ. A duty to be an example. What I'm putting on my life canvas is flowing out as an image into others. It leaves an imprint. The decisions I make and the choices I portray leaves an imprint. It's way more than just words I say. I can say words. I can say a lot of things. There are people who can say, get in the habit of saying I love you, but do you feel it? I had a special moment the other day. I say my girls, you know what I mean, Montana now. I was with them, and I've always been very, very tight. But Montana, when she was young, had some issues. Brother Mark can probably remember, and others of you who knew her. It was pretty interesting, wasn't it? You had to work. You'll fight hard for someone you love, so they don't get lost in their own mind. Because she was very much treated as if she was on the spectrum, and may have very well have been. I would say if she was diagnosed, I wouldn't have been surprised. But people who don't know her and only see her now or have seen her as she's older almost don't know what to do when I share this. She would get lost in her own language. She spoke early and very, very well. Very well. And all of a sudden at 2, she went backwards, which is a telltale sign of concern. Her mother was open and took her to speech therapy. Well, I became her literal playmate because I was determined, with God's help. I might get emotional because, I loved her. I did not want her to get lost in her own mind. And we would play and we would practice. She had a hard time with prepositions. And if she were playing with dolls, okay, let's put that doll under you. Let's put the doll over the thing. And slowly those things she caught on. A simple directive as, go to the kitchen and get Aunt Carolyn. She would repeat it because that's how her brain compensated for not processing the question. Go to the kitchen and get Aunt Carolyn. So you had to work her out of the repetition because that's how her brain coped with not knowing how to respond. So I would say, okay, go to the kitchen and get Aunt Carolyn. I'd say, come here. And I'd get her. I'd walk her to the edge of in the house where Carolyn was. And I'd say to her, hey, Aunt Carolyn, come here. And she'd repeat it. And we would go back into the den really fast. Aunt Carolyn knew what to do. She came in and would be like, what, Montana? And I go, oh, you did it, baby girl. And she'd get excited. And slowly over time, she grew out of that, didn't she? As Brother Mark may remember. It baffled my mother. With all these children she'd seen in her life, she'd never met anybody quite like her. Well, I use that. As you can tell, I had a lot of bonding time with Montana. I think she viewed me as her playmate as a child because we would do things and I was really trying to teach her. And we'd teach her through play. And so the other day, I shared this. We leave an imprint on people, don't we? Well, she left an imprint on me. We got to visit with her, and I was sitting in a chair. She was at my other niece's house, and this is a special moment for me. And those of you who parent, you'll understand deeper even than I do. And when I'm in the room, she kind of absorbs herself with me. Even still, I become her focus of attention. Very much so. She will talk almost exclusively to me. And she enjoys other people, but she'll just focus on basically me. And so we're interacting around a group of people, but it's almost just me and her. And they're getting tickled at us because that's how she and I communicate. We kind of enjoy each other. So she came up to me, and this is a special memory for me, and I'm sure all of you have your own with people you love. She stood in front of me, and she just did this. And she looked at me. She went, I love you. Brother Mark, he knows it as a parent, what that would feel like for someone. The love I had for her is the closest thing I could imagine and I don't know what you feel for children because I didn't live that life. But I know what I felt for this child who changed my life. The only person who's changed me more than Jesus is Montana. I'm just being honest. I love my other great nieces and nephews. Never would I want them to take offense to that. But she had a need, and I wanted to help her as best I could. I had to provide real life examples of social situations that other kids could navigate. She could not. She regressed in her own mind, and she entertained herself largely. So be an example. As we continue to add to our life canvas, what example is it being to others? I use Montana as a literal because I wanted her to come out of a situation that could have been horrific. Not that I did anything, God helped, and she just developed and grew, didn't she? And kids change as they develop and grow. But I thought it was good for me to reflect on what others may glean from interacting with me. When I interacted with her, I did it as a teaching. I'm not joking. I played and we taught. I taught her prepositions sometimes through playing because she struggled. I would practice with her how we would answer the who, what, when, where, and whys to relieve her brain of the pressure of not understanding what they meant and which one she needed in the context of conversation. I would offer her choices. Montana, what do I do with this Kleenex? What do you do with the Kleenex? She'd repeat the question. Montana, do I eat the Kleenex? No, you blow your nose. I relieved her brain of the pressure of processing the question because I gave her an example. Now, that sounds silly if someone watched us, but she needed it. That helped her develop an understanding. Well, what am I providing to other people? What do they reflect on after interacting with me? After hearing me speak? What do they reflect on my life canvas when they view from watching my choices? Someone watching me choose to interact with her that way could have had a who knows what kind of comment. Obviously, I did not care. If you know me at all, I ain't worried about that. I was going to do what was right for her. The question I ask myself, am I demonstrating a pattern of good works that others would want to emulate? And I think that's a fair question for us to ask ourselves as believers, do you not? Am I demonstrating a pattern of good works? What's flowing out from me is what's going to leave an impression on others, just like that image we looked at. And it's not just words, is it? We're old enough to know that it's not just words that leave an impression. Sometimes actions speak way louder, don't they? So the question I would ask myself, am I demonstrating a pattern of good works that someone else would view as worthy of not duplicating, emulating? If not, then I need to reflect on what I'm portraying on my life canvas. And I want to do that every day. I have to reflect and think, well, I should have done this differently, or well, I should have handled this situation differently. I learn that daily sometimes. What am I portraying on my life canvas to others? And I need God's help. If you look at kids, and I thought about children are interesting, and they obviously absorb a lot of what they're around, whether it be at school with playmates, whether it's home, grandparents, aunts, it's just, they're little sponges, really, especially when they're young. But I thought if you look at kids, and kids who have seen impulsivity modeled before them, what do they likely demonstrate when they're old enough themselves? Impulsivity. I mean, some of it's developmental, some of it is because of the age they are, but sometimes that's what they emulate because that's how decisions and choices have been modeled. Now, when they're young, that can also be developmental. Their brains are still developing. But as they get older, it's like some of them do not know how to stop the impulse approach to decision making. And I think about that because when you are younger, I think that can be a natural stage of life, impulsivity. I've done that. I have done that, especially when I was younger. The thing I love about getting older is sometimes you taper, you mature, and you understand, okay, that was dumb, and I need to do better. I mean, life teaches you that. But if I'm not letting life teach me that, I am not portraying a good image on my life canvas. That's putting an imprint on other people, is it? Those are the things I want to reflect on. What can I do and how can I do it better? Not so people look at me, so that they look and say, okay, God does help people through things. It's like some people, unfortunately, as they get older, do not know how to stop that impulse approach to decision making. Oh, I like this, so let's get it. But there's no forethought for whether or not can you really afford it. I mean, you have to learn that, don't you? Those of us who've lived some life. You really got to think about that. That should come with age because it leaves an imprint on others who watch that approach to decision making. Oh, let's go here. It should be fun. But is there no real forethought for whether or not going there is even feasible? Can you get off work? Do you have enough time to give to be able to go? Is it an appropriate time of year to do that? Do you have responsibilities? I'm not being a fuddy-dud. I'm being practical. You have to be mindful of those things. Sometimes in life, oh, I don't like this situation. I just can't handle it. I got to get out of it. It's impulse, 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 impulse. And sometimes there's no forethought for whether or not, do you really need to get out of the situation or do you need to, as we say, suck it up a little bit? It's time to press on. Some of the things I've had to sit and endure have helped me grow better than anything else because you just got to get through it. Impulsivity, what does it lead to? Chaos. Often it can lead to chaos. And a constant state of chaos is very stressful. And I thought about me, my responsibility as a believer before, obviously before your fellow believers, but especially before other people. God help me to be mindful of what my life canvas. When someone looks at me, pretend using canvas as an analogy, and you look at something, your eyes see because of the reflection and whatever of light that it does in your body, it leaves an impression, doesn't it? What impression am I leaving? What does someone walk away thinking and feeling? In 2 Corinthians 1 and 12, for our rejoicing is this, the testimony of our conscience, that in simplicity and godly sincerity, not with fleshly wisdom can lead to impulsivity. I'm just using that as one example. It can lead to just harshness, rashness, quick temperedness, anger. It can lead to a lot of things, can it? If we rely on fleshly wisdom. But by the grace of God, we have had our conversation in the world and more abundantly to you word. I can use fleshly wisdom to make some decisions. Sometimes they fail, don't they? What makes my heart hurt is when people try to attribute the credit to God. I'm leaving an impression that, wait a minute, Brother Danny, this decision doesn't seem like it fit very well. Oh, but God. And sometimes I'm afraid if I'm doing that, I want to be cautious with that phrase, to be quite honest, because that's not fair to God. And maybe I'm doing the best I know with the intentions I have, and then God understands. But you know what? Others could be watching my choices, my decision making, my reactions. Is he proactive? Is he only reactive? Living in a state of being reactive is absolutely stressful. Proactive, an ability to understand rather than just react. How do I take the situation? What are the next steps that make sense? Living in a constant state of reaction is how kids can get in fights. And sometimes as an adult, you're just fighting yourself and fighting against what could be good. Others could be watching my choices, my decision making, and all the while they hear me attribute things to God as part of the process. But what is it demonstrating to them? What pattern am I showing them? How am I being fair to God? And when I do that, because His word is clear. Will we have difficult times? Of course. I mean, any of us in here now are old enough, we know that's going to happen. Do we face hardship? Of course. My wife wrote a devotion recently, and she wrote about, you face hardships and trials, but she also pointed out that God's word declares He wants to help us through the valley. I believe she got that idea from a message from a minister that she heard, if I'm not mistaken, we were listening or we heard somewhere. I'm not wishing hardship on anybody, and I'm certainly not wanting it for myself. That isn't my goal. But when things happen, this is what I want to. I think about that little simple image. What comes out gets absorbed. Well, the same thing's happening as adults when we interact with the world, right? With loved ones, with friends, our fellow brothers and sisters, whatever the case is. My actions, my choices, and my decisions, they establish a pattern before other people. It'll feed into their minds and mix into their thoughts and help them formulate an impression about me and what I say I represent. It's very serious, isn't it? I mean, maybe you've all got this. Sometimes for me, it's good to reflect again. And I think about how very serious that is. I cannot discount it and slough it off. Everything is not always someone else's fault in my life, is it? I can't live life that way. That's immature. Okay? Sometimes you just have to, and I've had to do this. I can just speak from personal experience. Sometimes you got to own some choices and decisions and say, oops, I hope I never do it again. And by the grace of God, I don't want to. Because what it represents on my life canvas before other people can have an effect on them. And you can't walk around worried that you're always going to make somebody do something. That's not what I'm talking about. People will form their own opinion sometimes, no matter what. And that's how the devil can work against you. But whatever opinion they form or impression they develop will then come out of them also, won't it? Think about that little graphic. And sometimes I think about the seriousness of that. My wife is very kind about this issue. And I don't mean to share something that was her burden, but she shared with me, because I warned her when she married in a small town, a public school teacher, they were going to associate Rhonda Ray with who? They associate her with me. She's been places, and I'll get a text. Danny, this lady's talking to me. I don't know who she is. And she'll try and explain it. They know her because of who? Me. I mean, it's just how it is. But Rhonda Ray made a comment, and she said, that made a very serious impression on you, didn't it, Rhonda Ray? Not to take her testimony per se, but I don't think she minded me saying it. And she realized that, not only do people now, she gets associated because they know me, but if they watch her, what will her actions be associated with? Us. And me too, yes, but also just us. And she said that was something that left an impression on her, just to use as an example. Now, again, you can do your best and people will still try and tear down the good that you're doing. It's just unfortunate. But what I'm feeding, this is the thought, thinking about that little fella in the graphic and the image. What I'm feeding into others by the decisions and choices I make will also come forth out of them in some way, won't it? In an opinion they formed, in a judgment they want to offer. Oh, he says what he has is right, but he this, or he that, or she this, and she that. It's not fair, but you sometimes live under a microscope. And whether it's fair or not, you're going to swallow and get over it because it's just life, isn't it? I mean, it's just life. What am I feeding into others by the decisions and choices I make is what I feel it's important for me to reflect on when I think about this lesson. How are my choices adding to my life canvas that others in the world are viewing? What impression is it leaving? Therefore, the impression they get is what then they will portray, whether to others or to me. The verse I read mentions these terms, simplicity and godly sincerity. And I mean this. This isn't Brother Danny being Brother Danny. I'm not trying to be lighthearted about it. I mean this very seriously. I thank God for a simple life. Someone could look at me. They may even feel sorry for me, honey. Go off in a corner and feel sorry for me if you want to. I feel fortunate and blessed. I am thankful. I thank God for a simple life. I not only thank Him, but I praise Him. Rhonda Ray and I have everything we need, and we're thankful. We feel very fortunate and very blessed. If we feel fortunate and blessed, I hope that's what I'm portraying on my life canvas. I try to be cautious of that. We have goals as a couple. Most couples, I think, do that. But others will see the decisions and choices we make too, won't they? We are demonstrating a pattern before other people. Now it's not just me. It's Rhonda Ray and me. It is an us thing now. And we have certain goals that we think about. And one goal we have, and we try, but life is just, living is pretty expensive. But we just want to live below our means. That's just one simple example. Now, that's a simple goal, but it's one we try. We try. Now, we are fortunate and we can make some choices and have some things we want, and we're thankful. We may not always live right just at that, but we want that as a goal. We do not want to make hasty, and just using this as an example, it can be all kinds of things. A hasty financial decision, let's say, with God's help. We don't want to put ourselves in a bind. We don't want our marriage to suffer undue stress because we've chosen to live a life of impulsivity or not thinking through and praying about the situation as we should have. And I understand life happens to all of us. Sometimes you make decisions and you have no choice. But we don't want our marriage to suffer because now it's not just about me. How could we expect others, and I especially think about those in the world, those we work with, to look to us as an example and as an encouragement if the choices that we're making and the decisions we're choosing are not creating that life canvas that looks healthy to emulate? How could I expect me to be that example I'm encouraged to be in the Bible? Right? Is that fair to put that on me? I'll put it on me. In 2 Thessalonians 3:9, not because we have not power, but to make ourselves what? An example unto you to follow us. That verse should make me stop and think. I mean, all this from a little picture Sister Debbie shared. Isn't that interesting? Now, this is how my thought process goes. Yours might have been different. This verse should make me stop and think, am I creating an image that others would want to follow? I didn't say duplicate, because we're all different people. Is that which flows from my life and onto other people something they would want to repeat and replicate in their own way or encourage them or whatever? So my prayer is that God will help me, and then I'll put it on me first to be very mindful. I want to share a scenario that we were in Indiana. I think it was the last time we were there. And this brother was talking to Rhonda Ray after something. I cannot remember how they got off on this conversation. She probably told me. I can't remember. But that brother said something so kind to her. He told my wife, do not feel badly that she and I enjoy a simple life. Isn't that interesting? I can't remember how they got off on that topic. But she shared that to me. Like, she said, you know what, Danny? He told me, don't feel bad that you enjoy something simple. And we don't feel bad, of course. But he was just trying to be an encouragement, I guess. But you know what? She and I can just use us as an example. I'm just using us because that's what I can talk about. She and I enjoy time with each other, and we do very simple things. We can eat simple, cheap dinners, and we're happy. She'll look at me so sweetly sometimes. It's kind of funny. She means it as a compliment. Thank you for being easy. I'm like, well, sure, honey. What does it matter? She and I, we feel very fortunate and very blessed, and we recognize it. And I'm just using this one as just as an example because we're at a very different life stage than other people. We do not have children, and it's not our goal to have any. And I respect and recognize for many married people, children are an obvious goal. You marry at different stages of life, and that is an obvious goal, a next step. And I appreciate it. For me, it's job security. But that is not a goal for Ron, and I'm just using this because it's us. That's not a goal for Rhonda Ray and me. We met each other much later in life. And people are very kind about it, and they're very sweet about us, and they may mention adoption or foster care, and those are wonderful, noble things. If God lays that on somebody's heart, God will help them follow that. And I find that very sweet of them. But Rhonda Ray and I do not feel guilty that we simply enjoy having each other. My life is richly blessed because God allowed me the blessing of Rhonda Ray, and I am thankful. I cannot, and with God's grace, will not put a burden on myself because that's what other people's life canvas looks like. It's okay that my life canvas represents what God's given me. That's okay. And it's giving its own impression to other people. I am not anti-children, by the way. Please don't misinterpret that. If I had married at a different time in my life, maybe that would have been different for me if it was even a possibility. I just know this. I ain't worried about it. If I tried to do that, if I tried to put on myself someone else's life canvas, I could really put myself in a pickle, couldn't I? I could battle discouragement. Why can't this happen? Why isn't this? Why isn't that? I could really put myself in a place. And then the image I'm portraying is not one of contentment. It's not one of satisfaction and gratefulness and thankfulness. It's just always worried about what's not there. And I understand we can have goals and we look for things. But I want to create a pattern before others that encourages them to seek not Danny and Rhonda, to seek Christ in his love. I mean that with the sincerity of my heart, to know what it's like to feel that love when you're in a terrible situation. The Bible verse that really spoke to me through life circumstances I've encountered in the past few years, he does truly give you peace that passes understanding. Some situations seem very dire and hopeless, but he can still give you peace. Not only peace, but he can still give you happiness and joy in the midst of a very challenging situation. I want to create a pattern with God's help that demonstrates how God will get people, as she wrote about in the devotion, through difficult times and bless their life. In 1 Peter 2:21, for even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us. And what did he leave for us? An example, that ye should follow his steps. He is our ultimate example, but he didn't have an easy life, did he? But he lived a life that brought hope and encouragement to other people, didn't he? The things he went through were things that he had to endure as part of the process of his calling. We will have things we endure as part of the process of our calling, but my choices and my words and my actions and my reactions can actually make those worse. And God forbid I attribute them to God. That isn't the pattern he may be wanting me to set before others. I need to just reevaluate myself and self-reflect. And I want to. You've heard Rhonda Ray. I self-reflect. I try to put things and think about it. But the decisions that flowed from his body and into others brought life-changing experiences to them, didn't it? He literally changed their lives. And in return, what did they do? They worked to change the lives of other people. It involved sacrifice, it involved work, but they did it for the glory of God. And so the question again, do the patterns of behaviors and choices I make encourage others? That is the question I'll put on myself. Do I present a life canvas portraying experiences that will give others hope and make them feel like the life I say I have is worth emulating? And by emulating, again, I don't mean duplicating, because we're all different. But I do live a life and present a life before others. Do I do that? That will encourage them to seek after what I say I have. What's most interesting is that sometimes we do not really know what others are gleaning from the life image we present, do we? You really don't always know. And this next example is something I pondered, and I wasn't whether or not I would share it. But as Brother Mark says, when he sometimes shares stuff, he's not sharing for his self glory, it's just as an example. Okay, so I'm just sharing this as an example. And this happened last week. So I teach seventh grade again this year. Last year I call it my sabbatical at the high school. It's just for fun. But I taught high school, and I had a wonderful experience. I met wonderful people. One of them still texts me, "I miss you." My little Spanish teacher, she's like, "I miss you, brother." But I loved her. I loved my experiences. But things changed on one day this summer, and I ended up back at the middle school. I do not work for Ashe County Middle School. I work at Ashe County Middle School. Last year, I did not work for Ashe County High School. I worked at Ashe County High School. I work for Ashe County Schools. A lady at the middle school was moved this summer to be placed at Blue Ridge Elementary because that's where they wanted her and needed her. It's just kind of how things happen. Mine way wasn't exactly that way. A job came open that I had no idea would happen. And on this random Thursday, I think it was a Thursday this summer, something came available. And I thought, well, I don't know, that I would be interested in going back. I'd already thought, I didn't plan on retiring, God willing, from the high school because I just want to experience other things. And I very much like the younger age to some degree. But I did love high school a lot. So I thought, well, I'm interested in going back. And I was very fortunate that the superintendent chose to move me back. I'm thankful. It would have been fine to stay where I was, but she was very kind and gracious. Because I had an interest, she has the right to choose to move you wherever. Because I had an interest, she moved me. So this past week, so I'm back with 12-year-olds. So I was talking to one of my groups, and I tried to emphasize to them, that I don't give assignments or tests. It's not a game of gotcha. That's not how I want my classroom to be. I'm not interested in tricking them. I'm not interested in stressing them. I just want to give them something, and I don't want to give them something unrealistic. I just want to try to challenge them and see if they understand. That's fair, isn't it? But I don't want them to be discouraged. And I don't remember what I even said to the group now. I kind of maybe remember. I don't remember exactly what I said. And I posed the little question before the group about what do you think, basically, what are my intentions? And I don't share this because of me, just as an example, because I would never in my life, and I'm nearing the end now, you'd said, what might the child say? This would not have made my list. And I told the kids, I was like, okay, basically trying to get them to understand where I'm coming from. I just kind of posed the question to them. So, what do you think? What is my goal? Why do I do this? And this little girl, I got chill bumps, looked up and she said, "You give us courage." I didn't even know. How do you respond? And I looked. I've never in 20 some years, this is 24, had a child say that. I've had kids be sweet to me, and I don't mean I ain't even the best teacher on my hallway, much less my building, and sure ain't in the school system. I would never have dreamed that little girl had gotten that impression. But I do want them to feel like they can try. That failure is not a sign of weakness. It just means you need more help. That's okay. And so I appreciated her saying that. And it's very humbling, quite frankly, to hear that. And if you ask me what I think kids in my classroom would glean from the image I try to paint before them, I cannot imagine, I promise, that would have been anything I would have ever thought. I would never have thought that. But I do try to encourage them and boost them up and help them feel successful. I'm nothing. But I share that only to say, you really don't know what others glean, do you? Whether it be good, and unfortunately, it can go the other way. I'm sure I got those for the other way too. They just kept their mouths quiet, I guess. But I need God's help to be mindful of what I put out before others because they are soaking it in, aren't they? Just like that child listening to those words. People are soaking in life as well. Ephesians 5:15. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. And I love this version from the International Children's Bible. So be very careful how you live. Do not live like those who are not wise. Live wisely. I mean that you should use every chance you have for doing good because these are evil times. I want others to find the love of Christ. And I'd say hopefully that's all our goal. And I ask the Lord to help me to live a life before others, not that they want to glorify me. That is not, no, but that models living wisely. that shows that God will bless and help even during very difficult, challenging times. If I'm not doing that, then the question is, how can I expect others to think what I have is something they need if I'm not reflecting and doing that myself? And I found this to be a very serious thought that I wanted to reflect on and keep in my mind as I live my life. So God help me. That's my zipper, not the microphone. Thanks, Rhonda Ray. You're laughing.
Good lesson this morning. I appreciate that. You know, that little image Brother Danny sent us to look at to start with. We can look at that this morning and see him talking to us, putting these things in us, and that should be coming out of us. So that works perfect, doesn't it? That works perfect. Thank the Lord. And, you know, Brother Danny talking about a little girl saying that he gave them courage. And Brother Danny's very modest about things, but I know another student just said this week he was his favorite teacher. So that says something, you know, how Brother Danny's living and how it's affecting others. And, you know, he's not a good teacher just because he's Danny. It's because of God. Thank the Lord. A very good lesson this morning. Thank the Lord. We'll take a little bit of a break and then we'll move on to the service shortly.